Hello there. As I was going through my first year of graduate school, I realized that what I thought constituted a proper Vita is not what a professor or graduate program is looking for in a Vita. So I thought I'd take a moment to share what I've learned about writing a Vita with you, and I thought the best way to do that is by going through my old Vita and what the Vita looks like now. All right. Here is the old Vita. As you'll see, it looks a little bit like a resume. You have contact information at the top, then you have work experience, volunteer experience through here, listing some information about the position, and then the only real important portion, in my opinion, is this set here, the bullet points. Each of the bullet points is set to highlight the important parts of the job based on what I know about the position. So I was looking at research-driven clinical psychology programs. So I knew that in general they're looking for research first and that teaching is sort of a second thing. So as I went through, I tried to highlight any bit of research experience I had in any of my positions. So what use of survey software like Qualtrics or analysis software like SPSS or R. The other part is that as I whittled down and picked out the programs I was interested in, I looked at their website and I looked at the faculty members' webpage to determine how they talked and what they value. So a classical example in the mental health field is patient versus client. When you've got these two different opinions and both think the other's wrong in a lot of cases, and without going into any detail on the matter, if you're applying to someone who has the client view and you're using patient to describe your interactions with someone, they're going to notice, and that's going to be off with what they would use. And so that may be something to consider. And I considered that as I went through. Different fields will have different dichotomies or sets of ideas where people fall onto these two different sides of the issue. And it's important to take note of that so that you can convey that you would be a good fit, because being a good fit is important since the person is committing to training you in a PhD program for 4 or 5 years. That's a long time to be stuck supervising someone, and if you don't fit together, that could be a rough time. So as we get through all of this experience part, we come to the last page. The last page, I have education, so what degree I had, a little bit of information about that. Then I had selected courses. This is a little bit more interesting. So this was something I included to create a little bit of interest. They're courses that I thought would help set me apart from the other people applying. So senior thesis was an undergraduate thesis. It was part of my bachelor's. This is not too common at universities. Some do it, many don't. And so that gives me two benefits. One, it shows that I do more research or have done more research than a lot of people. As most psychology majors get a statistics class and a research design course, and that's the end of it. So I had those and this, so a little bit more experience with research. Then the last one, psychopathology and assessment, just shows that I've completed graduate coursework in the area I'm applying to. So maybe they can use that to help judge that I would be successful if they admitted me, as there is some worry about dropout rate. Following selected courses, we have honors and awards. I think honors and awards aren't particularly important in the sense that you have a lot of honors and awards, but in a secondary sense in that they point to something you can't really see. They point to characteristics of the person, that they work hard, they're successful, that they are good enough at what they're doing to earn an award for it. And I think that that can be important. And that if you had a good number of awards or awards that were relevant, so if you had research awards and are applying to a research university, for their PhD program, I think it would be worthwhile moving it up beyond where I am. And then certifications. Then finally, I had references. So certifications and references, I would probably leave out the certifications. Yes, they're tangentially relevant, but it really is just a way to show that you're engaged in the subject area in some way. And I think that belongs more in your letter of intent than in your Vita. Vita should really stick out as to your qualifications. And then references is really a holdover from when this was a resume. And it just helped to show that I was ready to go, that they didn't have to ask for references. They were already provided. I was serious about my application. And so there's a lot of information here, and some of it's pretty good. The problem is, well, there are two. First, this is not the format they were expecting, and so that can cause confusion, including things like salary can be a confusing thing in the application process, and depending on where you're using it. So if you're going for a volunteer position and you have your salaries, there may be confusion there. If you wanted to volunteer to work in a professor's lab as a step towards eventual admittance into the PhD program. The second issue is that there's so much going on here that it hides the most important information. Yes, I used the bullets and based it on their websites and what they say and value, but there's so much there that it's easy to miss what's important. And I think that was one of the biggest takeaways from this semester, this whole year as a whole, is that what's important is not what I thought was important. It's not so much about your work experience or how much you've made, but it's more about what you've done. And so, as you can see, for my current CV, I've changed it a lot. I still have the contact information at the top. I ended up moving education near the top. I chose to do this because your education is just something that needs to be checked off. So I figured that since it needs to be checked off, oh, does he have a bachelor's? Yes, he can be admitted on. That won't disqualify him from admittance. Then just put it at the top, makes it easy to find. That's why your name is at the top, so that it's easy to see whose Vita it is. Then I cut almost all of my work experience and almost all of the information from those experiences that I kept. So I have the times I had where I had that position, and then what the position was and where it was. That was it. This gives them the idea that I have done this job and this job and this job, and if they choose to interview me, it gives them a basis from which they have questions to ask. Oh, I see from August 2019 you were a graduate assistant at SFA. Can you tell me about that? What were your responsibilities and duties? So one, that gives them something to ask. Two, it sets me up for an easy question during an interview of course I can talk about what I've done. I spent a whole year doing it. That's easy enough. The next section was research interests. This is here for two reasons. One, I am going to be applying to research-focused programs. And two, I don't have any publications. The publication section of a professional Vita is where you go to look to see what the person's interested in researching. You have a list of all the publications you can see. What were this topic? The title here, title here, title here. What were all the topics? I don't have any publications. Not uncommon for someone in a master's to not have any, but having the research interest area there helps supplement my letter of intent, and it says, this is what I intend to pursue with my research and my time. I think if you had publications, I would definitely drop the research interest section. Next, continuing with the research interest focus, I have conference presentations, so where I gave let's just go with an extended presentation over a topic that I'd researched. So in this case, it was a project I conducted on sleep. It was at a local conference at the university. And so that goes in. I have separated it from poster presentations because the conference presentation where you're presenting live in front of a bunch of people is much more challenging for me, and it involves a lot more prep work and time and effort than a poster presentation where I stand in front of a poster and answer questions people might have as they walk by. Then research is over. I go into teaching because teaching is the next important thing. And I think that's because, at least in psychology, a lot of graduate students are funded through teaching assistantships. And so there's an aspect of teaching involved. For the teaching heading, I have just the times when I was the teacher of record. So I was the person responsible for lesson planning, for delivering the lesson, for grading, and providing feedback to students. Then I had a section on guest lectures. So guest lectures was where I was not in charge of the class, but someone had asked me to come in, give a presentation, and I was just there for 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes giving a presentation on something. I think it's important for me to separate them because I see them as very different things. You may not, and in that case, you could combine them. Next, we have a section for the classes I've been a teaching assistant in. I copied this idea from a professor I knew who kept track of all the classes she taught and how many students were in each class and when the class was. And I thought, that's an interesting idea. It helps keep track of what you've taught and how involved you are in the teaching process. And so I have done that for my teaching assistant classes. Next, I have honors and awards. This is still towards the end because I don't have any particularly outstanding awards. I have added to them since I entered graduate school, but I don't think moving them up would fit well into the flow I've designed, and I don't want to move them all the way to the top for two reasons. One, they're not an outstanding set of awards, and two, if they're the first thing, I would worry about how that would be interpreted. Would people think I had a very high opinion of myself, that I might be difficult to work with if it was the first thing? And then finally, I have affiliations, so my professional affiliations within my field. This is the set of changes I've made. Really, these are here for a couple of reasons. First, they are here to make this easier to read. So everything has been slimmed down. There's much less information. You can see right here, everything is just much sleeker. Two, I've changed the information that's being presented. I've removed what I've learned is extraneous, unnecessary information, and I've added a whole bunch of information that's relevant. You wouldn't have seen any of these presentations when I was applying to graduate school. I had one, but I didn't put it on, and so I didn't get any credit for it. So make it easy to read and make sure that you include the relevant information. How do you know what's relevant? Well, let me show you my working document. Well, this is the same Vita, except I have added some blank sections. So grant funding, peer-reviewed publications, etc. These are here because I've looked through a good number of Vitas from people in my field, and I've looked at what categories they've had. And grant funding's a big one. Publications are a big one. One down at the bottom for service. That's a big one if you're a professor, but it's not important as a graduate student. You wouldn't be in a position to fill that category. I just have it and all the others in here to remind me of where I'm headed, that these are categories that I can add to as I continue my career. I think that's important to remember that, yes, you have a Vita frozen in space as you apply, but that they change as you grow. That every now and again you should update it, one, based on what's in it. So seeing if there are any new categories that are in it or adding your new accomplishments to it. And 2, making sure it still clearly communicates what you've achieved, because when it comes down to it, a Vita is essentially an academic scorecard. It's keeping track of how successful you've been and what you've achieved. And then 3rd, I would say it's important to change your Vita so that it reflects what you're applying for. If you're applying for a teaching position at a university like SFA that focuses on teaching, my Vita wouldn't be great. If we go back to the Frozen in Time version, I have all my research stuff first. SFA doesn't care as much about research. I should move the teaching portion to the top, then put the research, because research is secondary there. If I'm at this huge university like Texas A&M or UT or North Carolina Chapel Hill, where research is the focus, I want to keep the research first. So, I want to leave you with a couple of points. First, this Vita is designed for psychology. It's based on what I've learned in a psychology master's and what I've seen in Vitas of psychologists. You may see something different in other fields. I haven't explored them because I don't intend to go into them. But it's up to you to make sure that everything I've suggested here fits into your field. As in, if they want specific information that I don't have found to be irrelevant to psychology, you need to check to make sure so you don't get caught with your pants down. 2, find out what the program values are. Or if you're using a Vita for a job, find out what that company or institution values. Then use that to craft how your Vita is constructed, what you highlight, the order of everything. Then make it easy for the person reading your Vita to find out what's going on. I think this is easiest to illustrate with doctoral programs in clinical psychology. You have universities like Texas A&M that get over 300 applicants every year. That's a lot of paperwork to go through. This Vita is only 2 pages. That's still a lot of pages when you factor in 300 people. So make it easy so that they don't have to go looking for what they're trying to check off. Does he have a bachelor's? What was his GPA? What was his research experience? Does he have research experience? Whatever the box is that your field tries to check, make sure it's easy for them to find it. All right. Well, that's all I've got for you. I hope that this has been useful to you or will be useful to you as you craft a Vita for a job or applying to graduate school. I'd encourage you not to copy this Vita. The formatting is personal preference, and the reasons for everything I've had in here are based on my experiences in my situation. I'd encourage you to take the ideas I have of making things easy to read, modeling what you have after the professionals in your field, and building the Vita for the specific program or job you're applying to, and creating something that highlights your strengths and shows the program you're applying to or the job you're applying to that you are the ideal candidate for the few spots they have open.